Okay. All right, everyone. Welcome to 4 to Z. This is Eric JB, and you are listening to 4 to Z every Wednesdays at 3 p.m. here on 93.7 FM SCA1 Radio Sentinel, where we talk about bridging the gap between all generations, the silent generation, baby boomers, Generation X, and of course, the millennials and Generation Z. We do this by having conversations with people who are from every generation, learn what they're going through, and just really trying to relate to each other by listening to one another better. Just want to remind you that you can find me on Instagram at youth_mentor101, where I host a podcast by the name of Youth Ministry and Mentorship 101. This week, I'm speaking with Pastor Jonathan Osario, who has an awesome book about inspiring people of all generations. So check out that episode. But hey, stay tuned because we have an awesome interview today on 4 to Z. So here we are.
Pop out with some lessons for a lifetime. You finna sit down and talk about the times. Keeping it 100 for the one time. For our generation, talking all the time. For the C, for the C, yeah, yeah. For the C, for the C, yeah, yeah. For the C, for the C, yeah, yeah. For the C, pop out with the Z.
All right, so we are here today with my brother Ted, who is someone who's doing awesome work in the world of social media and multimedia. I mean, he is a part of a group called PDF Ministries. They do all kinds of shows. In fact, let me just hand it off to him. How you doing today, brother?
Man, I'm doing good. It's a pleasure for me to be here. Thank you for having me. Well, like you said, my name is Ted Registre, and I'm a member of PDF Ministry and Equosa here, and I'm based in Fort Worth, Texas. So it's a pleasure for me to be here once again. And I love what you're doing with the youth, man.
Oh man, I appreciate it. How is it? How's the weather right now in Texas, man?
Right now, we just got over the hottest part of the year. So the past month, it was in the hundreds, but now we're slowly transitioning to the 80s, 90s. So it's still pretty hot, but more comfortable than before.
Wow, it's interesting that you say it was in the hundreds, and now we're getting a little comfortable in the 80s, 90s, and then people up north are like, huh? I think that's still very hot being in the 80s and the 90s, man. Yeah. So, man, I know what PDF Ministries does. They do some awesome things, but man, can you give us some info on what PDF Ministries do and that show that you guys just finished that you had on Friday nights, man? Talk to us about it.
Well, PDF Ministry, I can say, it's a brainchild of GV, Jefferson Previous. He started PDF back in California with Pastor Eloi back in 2011, right? And then that's when he started doing the Sabbath school lesson. And then when he moved out here, I moved to Texas in 2011, for college. So we met, and then that's when we started talking. And then I used to do Sabbath school lesson with Shekinah, right? And then one day we had youth day. I did the Sabbath school lesson, and GV approached me. He's like, hey, man, you want to join, so we can do Sabbath school lesson together, right? And that's how we started doing the lesson together at Shekinah. Right, and then we got a couple more young adults involved. Got the pastor involved when he came back from doing his master's at Andrews, and then that's how the group expanded. But really, at its core, PDF Ministry is kind of we kind of empower young adults. We also do gospel concerts. We did one in Boston, in Brockton specifically, and we did one in New York in 2016. So we really want to expose young adult talents because we're seeing that divide in churches. The older generations and the young adults, there's not really a bridge between the two. And you see that exodus of young adults in the church, right? They go off to college, they don't come back. you know. And so our role is to try to, you know, show them that, okay, if they can go to another church because they think it's cooler, you know, why can't our church, you know, make the necessary changes to make sure that we don't lose, you know, that population? Because if the young adults leave, if all of them leave, then after the baby boomer generation, you know, there's no church. You know what I mean? So
Yes.
we're really trying to make sure that, you know, we preserve the young adults. But the drop mic itself, since I run the young adult ministry at Shekinah, so
Mm.
every Saturday morning, you know, we have the gym, so we meet with the young adults in the gym, and then we try to talk about, you know, the same topics that we discuss in drop mic, right? We have this ministry at the church called Step Out, and we take the young adults after church, we take them outside of the church, like, you know, we take them around the city of Dallas, city of Fort Worth, so they can visit, you know, familiarize themselves with the city. But also after each day, we sit down and we talk about something, you know,
Yeah.
how they feel, you know, with the adults at church, you know, if there's anything that frustrates them and things like that, because a lot of times those things are not addressed in
Mm.
the church, right? So we want to make sure that their voices are heard, you know, they talk about what bothers them and things like that. So when Corona hit, you know, we still wanted to still have that platform, but since we couldn't meet at home, you know, at the church, we decided, you know what, let's bring it virtually. So, you know, we sat down with GV, ND, and the rest of the team, and then we came up with the Drop Mic name, you know, and that's how the show was born. So, yeah.
Wow. So you guys, yeah, every Friday night, you said, I believe season 1 ended,
Yeah.
but every Friday night, you guys would hit a topic that was
Mm-hmm.
really relevant to young adults. I mean, the young adults were
Yeah.
calling in, commenting. They were on fire. Can you give us like your favorite episode and what was the topic?
I had two episodes that stood out to me. The first one was the one about social justice, right?
Mm,
Because that week we had the whole George Floyd issue that had
yes.
happened. And personally, you know, I feel like, you know, the church as a whole didn't really address that issue as much as they should. And, you know, for us young adults, especially us living in Texas, you know, everybody knows Texas as, oh, Texas is a racist state, you know, and all this stuff, right? So um, we went to a couple of protests, you know, with some of the young adults from church. And so I felt like at that time, you know, our platform needed to address what was going on, you know, as far as systemic racism and things like that in the country, which is also very real, you know, in the lives of those young adults that live and go to the church, you know. So we addressed that, and the panel was pretty solid, you know, it was a pretty solid panel. You know, we had a great conversation. Um, One other episode that was a favorite of mine was we had an episode about young adults. I forgot the title. It was really kids being afraid of disappointing their parents, right? Their
Ooh,
kids not following their dreams out of fear
wow.
of disappointing their parents. Because the main reason why because before, so I can a little bit, 2 weeks before we started the show, we met and we try to, you know,
Yeah.
brainstorm some topics, right? And then one of our conversations we had with the young adults at the church was that a lot of them felt pressured into studying something in school that they weren't really interested in, right? And that's something that's very common in our churches too, you know? So
Yes.
we felt the need to address that topic on the show. And we had a panel of, you know, young adults, you know, some that have gone away from what their parents expected of them to do,
Yes.
and some who followed the path that their parents expected of them. So that was a really great episode, you know. I think that was one of my favorite. Yeah, that was definitely my
Wow.
favorite episode on the show.
Yeah, this topic, man. Once you said that topic, I was like, "Oh man, I want to
Yeah,
talk about that right now."
yeah,
I mean, yeah, in the Haitian culture, man, that
mm-hmm,
we are there's a statement I've been saying it a few times. You know, l'église, l'écaille,
oh,
l'école.
yeah, that's
So you know, they have this standard for us. They
right.
want us to
Mm-hmm,
be wonderful Christian
yeah,
men and women, and
mm-hmm,
in that includes education, and
yeah,
with that they want us to have a very well established career with high income. So
Yeah.
of course, the ones that you look at are doctor, nurse,
The
lawyer.
Yeah.
You see, we're saying the same things at the same time because
Yeah.
it's the same everywhere. Lawyer, engineer, doctor, nurse,
Yeah.
and anything else. You're gonna hear a kisa. What was that? Or they're gonna ask, how much are you going to make if you pursue this?
That's
So
right. That's right.
it's really an interesting topic because I'll be transparent. My mom did not want me to be in ministry. My mom, and it's interesting because in Haiti, that's one of the jobs that is respected, be a pastor.
That's true. That's true.
But when they came over here and they started seeing how much Seventh-day Adventist pastors actually make, now it went down on the list. So my mom was like, no, that's not, you're not going to be making money. It should be, nurse or a doctor or something like that. And that causes this psychological turmoil.
Yeah.
One, because we have something that we want to do. And for me, in ministry, it wasn't even my choice because I agreed with my mom. I was like, yeah, I want to be, but I had no desire because God kept saying you're supposed to be in ministry. So it became a real issue for me. So I don't know what you got to say about that, but man,
I mean, I totally agree because, for me personally, when I came to the States, it's like we're so conditioned to think about those only career paths, right? So when I came here, my goal was to be a doctor, right? I went to school studying pre-med. But it's like I was never really passionate about it. You know what I mean? During internship and things like that, it's like, I get good grades, but I don't see myself doing this for the rest of my life. You know what I mean? So I remember I had a conversation with one of our other guys, Max. He came on Drop Mic a couple of times, and he was with us in Texas before he moved to Atlanta. And he was like, man, I feel like, you can do so much more than just medicine, Because I feel like if you go into medicine, you'll be limiting yourself, But it was, that spoke to me. But at the same time, it's like, the whole time, the entire time I was going to school, I was questioning myself, like, okay, do I see myself doing this? Was I doing it just because my parents wanted me to do it? Was it really my choice, And eventually I ended up not working in the field. So it's like, I don't consider it wasted time because I learned a lot, But, now I work in the business field, in the financial sector. But ministry itself was something I feel like, I don't know. I never really thought about getting involved in ministry. But it's just meeting with the guys and, there's seeing the needs of young adults, right? And then seeing how, because I observed that decline when I went to, when I was in Boston, when I was in Malden, I went to the church, and then even coming to Texas, right, for school, because my first 2 years of college were at the Seventh-day Adventist school. So one of the things that I would notice is the young adults, they would come to the church, or at the university, they were obligated, because if you didn't come to church or if you didn't go to assembly, you would get a fine. So they had to come. But once they graduated, they never came back to church because they always associated church with a fine. If I don't go to church, I get fined, So they never really got to love what the church had to offer, So they just left. And the same thing I noticed in Haitian churches. They go to college, they don't come back, So, and then meeting the guys, we all shared the same, concerns and things like that. So that's how, we started doing all these things for you.
Yeah, it's such an interesting topic in the fact that when we put these expectations on our upcoming generations and our young people, they don't want to disappoint their parents. That's the tough part. The tough part. It's like we don't want to, how can you go to, like, I couldn't even have that conversation. My mom had to realize, God had to talk for me. I'll be honest. God had to talk to her for me because I didn't know how I could sit my mom down and say, Mom, God called me to be making $40,000 a year as a minister, and maybe not even a church pastor. I mean, outside the box ministry, a radio show where I'm not even getting paid, these kinds of things. And I didn't know how I could have that conversation with her. I was just like, I was too afraid. I didn't know how to say it, I didn't have the strength or the courage. I was torn because I was like, I agree with her too. Like, I don't want to be making so little money. And, I was just afraid to say it, man. And the other thing I wanted to say before I let you respond, man, is the fact that, it was just like, how do you how do you tell how do you tell them that purpose is what brings you joy, right? Because we the thing about these jobs is, when you ask your parents, when they're like, Mom, why do you want me to be a nurse? Mom, why do you want me to be a doctor? Why do you want me to be a lawyer? They're picturing the paychecks for you. So they're always telling you, you're going to be touching this. Yeah, you're going to be making this money. You're going to be making six figures. You're going to, pharmacist, you're going to be making this money. You're going to be making that. And then you're like, but what am I going to be doing every single day? And will I enjoy it? Will I like it? Yeah. And that's the tough conversation, man.
Even for us, PDF ministry, in the beginnings, well, for PDF ministry to get to where it is today, we made a lot of sacrifices, right? I know GV, ND, those guys sacrificed time, resources, and to bring the ministry to life. And, as time went on, we've all invested money into the ministry without getting anything in return. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like, you do all of this because we're passionate about it. You know what I mean? So at the end of the day, it's not, if we were dependent upon a paycheck, then PDF ministry wouldn't exist. The Sabbath school lesson wouldn't exist, because for us, for instance, right now we just got done recording the lesson for the whole quarter. Our last day recording, we're recording lesson 13. We were done at midnight. We had Saturday morning, so we had to produce the live for the church. And right after that, we started recording lessons, lesson after lesson, and then weren't done until midnight, And it's really hard for us to find people that are committed, that will give you their best without a paycheck, Yes. So, we've been blessed to have, individuals that are willing to participate, So I guess that's been one of the blessings, PF ministry. And we're also blessed to have a church, that supports, what we do, Shekinah, and a church board, like when we present something to them, they agree. Because I remember when the pandemic started, the pastor was preaching from his cell phone. It was on Facebook Live from his cell phone. So when they had church board meeting, we brought up the idea, hey, we can do a better job with the live, And some people were really hesitant. They're like, what needs to be done? The pastor gets to preach. We don't need anything else, And they were like, for us, there's a standard of our production that we want to keep, And we're like, well, let's test it for one Sabbath, and then, you guys can give us feedback. And then we did one Sabbath, and it's been going on ever since. So.
They saw that one test and they were like, oh, this looks the way it should look. Because I anybody listening right now, if you have checked out the live stream of Shekinah, they have the lighting is crisp, the audio is so nice. I've never seen a live stream like Shekinah, man. It is one of the top live. There's Mount Rubidoux, Oakwood, and then there's Shekinah, this Haitian church, man, in Dallas, doing an awesome job. So that brings me to something I want to talk to you about, man. The fact that your church empowers young adults, man. And because of that, this great avenue, this great ministry has opened up, because you guys have a great team around you that does great media productions, man. So it's like when that, I know we can't talk, the specifics, but like, is there people in that church that are, of the older generation that are like, you know what, let these young adults do their thing? Is there an advocate for you guys?
Yes. So I'd say one of the things that one of the good things about Shekinah is, for Texas in general, the Haitian population in Texas is a young population, right? So it's mostly young adults who've relocated to Texas for college, for work, or newly married couples that relocated out of either New York, Massachusetts, Florida. They come to Texas. So the church itself is a really young church. The pastor is really young. I went to college with the pastor. So we all basically either grew up together, know each other from Haiti, school in Haiti, and things like that. But I'd say one of the biggest advocates for the young adult ministry is the pastor. You know, he's always, whenever we have board meeting, he always talks about, this is the potential those guys have, support what they're doing. And then we also have some of our elders, you know, whenever, because for us, normally when we bring up something to the church, we do a presentation for them. This is how this will benefit not just the young adult ministry, but this how it will benefit Shekinah as a whole, and they're always willing to listen, and so far we haven't had any obstacles really,
Yeah.
when it comes to support from the church. So that's been a blessing. So,
Man, the best. See, this is something I think is really interesting, that you have a young adult pastor, a young
yeah,
adult Haitian pastor.
yeah,
And for those who aren't Seventh-day Adventists or aren't aware of the Haitian Seventh-day Adventist community, that is actually a rarity,
is
to have
it?
a senior pastor who is
Yeah.
who is a young adult, a millennial.
Mhm.
We have quite a few Generation X and quite a few baby boomer
Yeah.
Haitian pastors, and they've been pastoring for quite some time.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying that as a bad thing. I'm just saying that there is a crop of young adult pastor generation Z and Y
Mhm.
who are in tune with the young adults and
Yeah.
know what they're capable of, that can advocate and do amazing things. So I think that's
Mhm.
something that Haitian churches need to look at in
Yeah.
understanding that, because if they are a pastor, usually they're the youth pastor.
Yeah, that's true.
And if they are the youth pastor, sometimes they're not qualified to be a youth pastor. They're just,
Mhm.
because they're supposed to be, under the senior pastor or something like that. So
Yeah.
it's yeah. So how is it? Let me ask you this question then. How
Mhm.
is it having a pastor who you went to school with? How is that, man? Because
You
that's
know,
very rare.
for me personally, so Pastor and I, we met at SWAL, Southwestern Adventist University, and we played soccer together, for the school. So that's how we met. And so we spent our first 2 years of college together, and then I transferred. Then he moved on, graduated and moved on to Andrews, you know. So I was a groomsman at his wedding, and things like that. So when he came back from Michigan, because us, the small group of Haitians that were at the university, we started Shekinah, right?
Mm,
Because I remember when we used to worship at a different church in their cafeteria, you know.
yeah.
And then, the church slowly grew. So when the pastor came back from Michigan, um, you know, I had a hard time calling him Pastor Pierre, or Pastor Shilo. I just called him by his first name because,
Yeah.
we were that close. So, that's one thing for us that works in our value, because to us, he's a friend before a pastor. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that we kind of have this close relationship with the pastor. And the same goes for most of the members at the church, believe it or not, because even the elders, the deacons and stuff, we all play soccer together. We have a soccer team together down here. So we're all friends, you know, before.
Nice.
Yeah. So I think that's one of the privileges we have, you know, down here, you know, and that's one of the things that we try to bring into Drop Mic, you know, because so for each episode, we have to carefully select our panelists, right? And we
Yeah.
make sure that each panelist, they have to be young adults. So we have an age limit for the panelists that come on the show. And each panelist, we make sure that they're well versed in the topic, right? They're either well versed or very passionate about a topic. You know, they're very knowledgeable about it, and you know, they're not afraid to express themselves. Because Drop Mic really is a space for people to be genuine and authentic. You know, we want them to come on and talk about whatever's on their mind, you know,
Yes.
without any restrictions. One of the things that some of the church members actually did struggle with that when we first came out with the show, because they saw, you know, people coming on, panelists, you know, stories and things like that, you know. And one of the things I had to address, church about, is that Drop Mic is not strictly for Seventh Day Adventists, right?
Ooh.
Because when we have our youth meetings on Saturday mornings, you know, I tell the kids to invite their friends, right?
Yeah.
Invite their friends. So I don't do youth meetings only for Seventh Day Adventist kids, right? Because then we're not doing anything. If they're
There you
already in
go.
the church, then I'm only talking to them. It serves no purpose, right? So we have to reach people that are on the outside. So that's the whole purpose of Drop Mic, right? We bring people that are on the outside, because one of the things I feel like our church struggles with the most is that we have this tunnel vision, right?
Yes.
We're not open to hear others' perspectives. You know, even on issues that are not biblically, even on issues that are not biblical, right? Something like social justice, right? It's something everybody can talk about. You know, so there should be no issue to have a panel that comprise, you know, that has Adventists and non-Adventists, you know, because it's something that's affecting everybody, you know. So that's why we brought, you know, people from different backgrounds, you know, onto the platform, because we want our members to see both sides of every topic, right? This is a Christian talking about it. This is a non-Christian talking about it as well, you know. So that's the most important thing for us, you know, is exposing our members to, you know, something they're not comfortable with, you know.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, something they're not comfortable with. I love that. I love that. That's something that I hope this show, you know, establishes, because, you know, we're trying to
Mhm.
connect with other generations and things like
Yeah,
that. And when you
yeah.
do that, you start to see the world differently,
Hmm.
and you know, other generations see things differently, and they're willing to talk to different groups that you're not willing to talk to. I mean,
Yeah.
Generation Z has no issue talking to somebody who's non-binary or
Exactly.
LGBTQIA plus, right?
Hmm.
And you know, somebody of an elder millennial, myself, or silent generation, they might not wish
Hmm.
to have any kind of conversation with those kinds of
Yeah.
groups of people and things like that. And that's where I think the church gets a lot of issues and things like that. I
Hmm.
mean, going back to the social justice thing,
Yeah.
the leadership is of a certain age group, and they are a certain mindset, and while
Yeah.
the young adults are saying, hey, we need to be a part of this, we need to be active, I mean,
Hmm.
millennials are all about activism and speaking
Exactly.
out.
Yeah.
We are all of and Generation Z, they're more entrepreneurial and a little more conservative than millennials, but they're not about hypocrisy and you know, exclusivity. They don't like that.
Yeah.
They like being inclusive to everybody. So it's very interesting that you are doing that, and that's what millennials do. That's why you
Yeah.
gotta connect with your young adults,
Hmm.
millennials, because they're about purpose
Yeah.
and all these things, while Gen Z, they're entrepreneurial, but they see
Hmm.
the world in a specific way. And you
Yeah.
know, and then you mix with a Generation X and a baby boomer, and then we got a church, man.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Once again, everybody, thank you for listening in. We are on 93.7 FM SCA1 Radio Sentinel. This is 4 to Z. I'm talking to Brother Ted, who is a part of PDF Ministries. We're talking about some interesting topics, so stick around. We're going nowhere. We got a few more, about 30 more minutes of this, man. But yeah, just reminding you where you are, what channel you're listening to. This is 4 to Z once again.
Pop out with some lessons for a lifetime. We finna sit down and talk about the times. Keeping it 100 for the one time. Yeah. For our generation, talking all the time. For the C, yeah, yeah. For the shade, yeah, yeah. For the shade, for the Z, yeah, yeah. For the C, pop out with the Z.
All right, everybody. So you're listening to 4 to Z. I'm with my friend Ted, who is up there in hot Texas. He's saying it's cooler now, but it is in the 80s and 90s over there. So that's not cool to me, man. I mean, 60-degree weather. I'm wearing a short sleeve shirt because I'm from Massachusetts and now I'm in Michigan. And man, I mean, already it's starting to get to 70s now in August, man, in Michigan. So, man,
it's really hot down here, man.
I think I saw a video once of, I think in Texas or Arizona, where somebody was literally cooking an egg on the road.
Yeah.
It's that hot down there, huh?
It is, especially the pavement, you know, when you go out. That's especially for us, we play soccer on Sundays, you know, and we play soccer at 6 p.m. and it's still like 90 plus degrees. Sometimes it's 104 degrees, you know. So I don't think I've gotten used to it. You know, I try not to go out too much when it's too hot, you know, but yeah, it's pretty brutal.
So even because didn't you were you born in Haiti?
Yeah, I was. You know, I don't think it's ever this hot in Haiti.
It's never that hot.
It's not, because one of the things about Texas heat is you know, in Haiti when it's hot, then the wind blows and you feel the breeze.
Yeah.
Here, when it's hot, the wind blows. It's still hot air. You know what I mean? So it's that dry heat that we have down here.
Yeah.
You know, it's good because I think it's not as bad as Florida because Florida is very humid, but here it's dry heat.
Yeah.
So it's just hot.
Yeah. Florida, like if it's really, 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 really hot, like by afternoon, you're going to get one of those quick thunderstorms and it cools down a little bit. So yeah, because it's all humidity. So yeah. And sometimes sometimes in Massachusetts, that's the same case too, because there's some humidity here there too. But yeah, Michigan it's either really hot or really cool or, you know, snowing. So, man, speaking about Texas and how you have this group of Haitians that have, you know, relocated because I think, you know, when we talk about Haitians who move to America, we're talking about Northeast and Florida. In fact, sometimes in Haiti, when they refer to those states as America, like they're like, oh, you're going to Florida or you're going to Miami, they you know, New York, Boston, these are the places where you're going to find a lot of them. But, you know, there's a few that are in, you know, Chicago and all over the world. But, you know, in these other states, there's, you know, a smaller group. And I think Shekinah is one of those. And it's interesting to hear how you guys were a small group of young adults and you guys started a church. So my question to you is, man, how is it to be, you know, a church founder, somebody who knows the pastor well? I mean, basically what you're experiencing in Texas is what our forefathers experienced, you know, in New York or Boston, in starting a church with a young pastor and then creating this culture in your community. So how's that like?
Well, I mean, you know, when I first moved to Texas, you know, I only knew of 6 Haitians and all of them went to school.
Yeah.
You know, so to me, I thought, well, there are no other Haitians in Texas. right? So my roommate and I at the time, college, we started a page called the Haitian Social Circle in Dallas on Facebook.
Mm.
And that page now has grown to over 800 people. You know, we
Wow.
do social events for the Haitian community in Texas, right? We have this event once a year called One Night in Haiti. We do it at the Art Museum in downtown Dallas, where we have basically, we showcase the Haitian culture to the people of Dallas, right? People come from all over, right? They come, they taste Haitian food, you know, they buy Haitian products from small business owners. You know, they basically get a taste of what being Haitian is like to them, right? So it's a very classy event. You know, you have to dress up to come to the event and things like that. You know, so we've been doing that. You know, that's grown. So it's like, you know, gathering communities and things like that. You know, that's something we've always been about. You know, ever since we moved down here to Texas. So when we started, so the church really was Pastor Lo's idea when he was, you know, studying theology at Southwestern. Him and his good friend Pastor Johnny Moise, you know, they got together and they decided, hey, you know, they're gonna start a church, right? So they got permission from the university to have worship in the theology chapel, right? There was a church on campus, but there was also a chapel, which was a classroom, really. So that's what we used to do our meetings, you know, 6 people on
Yeah.
Saturday. And then over time, they met with this, it's a Ghanaian church. They allowed us to worship in their cafeteria. The issue with that was they were also a Seventh-day Adventist church. So we were
Oh.
having service in their cafeteria while they were having service upstairs. It's
Yeah.
loud. And then whenever they're done, they just come downstairs in the cafeteria and start
Yeah.
eating and talking while we're having service, you know?
Mm.
So eventually, right across the street from them, there was a Church of Christ. You know, it's an older congregation. You know, it's, you know, the congregation, they've all, you know, passed away, really, and only about 20 members were left. So they have a big sanctuary and a small chapel.
Yeah.
And, you know, they've allowed us to come worship in their chapel for a very small fee every month. You know,
Nice.
we ain't even paying them $500 a month, you know?
Wow.
So that's really how worship kind of started. That was our first building, right? And for that money, we had access to the entire building, right? And we could
Wow.
stay there whenever we wanted, however long we wanted. So that was really our first church, you know? And, you know, the church grew over time. You know, I remember when she kind of started, some days we would only have one family, you know, or two families.
Mm.
So around that time, I had transferred and went to the public school. So I was 2 hours away from the church. So on Saturdays, I would commute 2 hours to go to Shekinah, you know? So it was challenging. I can say
Yeah.
during this time, especially, you know, as far as budget, you know, because most people were in school. So slowly, you know, little by little, people started graduating, starting their careers, you know, supporting the church financially. And the church started growing, you know, started buying equipment and things like that. You know, then in 2015, you know, Pastor graduated from Andrews and then came back to Texas, you know. And then right around that time, you know, we finished school from, you know, everybody from wherever they were. And then we
Yeah.
all moved to the same area, you know. Now every member at Shekinah, we live within a 20-minute
Yeah.
distance from each other, you
Yeah.
know. And it's crazy because the church is not even 2 minutes away from me, from where I live. You know,
Nice.
so we all live. So if I want to go to see the pastor, it's 5 minutes. You know, 7 minutes. You know, that's basically 20 minutes max. So that's so that's why we had to move the church to this location. So we found a new location. So we had to move Chicana to Fort Worth, the location that you visited. You know, we recently moved there. You know, so now the church
Yeah.
is closer to all the members, and then now, you know, Chicana's membership has grown. You know, well over 100 people.
Wow.
You know? So it's growing. You know, slowly but surely. You know, and you know, for us who started the church, you know, I don't even remember the last time we talked about, you know, we started Shekinah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But all of us who were founding members are still there. You know,
Nice.
we're all still in
Nice.
Shekinah, and yeah, you know, it's growing. It's growing.
Yeah. D- the reason I brought it up is because I think this is something that I've heard stories similar to yours, but they happened, 25 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting because I'm bringing this up for this specific reason, because I've heard these stories done, 25, like my home church, Bethel, it was a bunch of young adults,
Yeah.
and they started up a church. They had to
Mhm.
find, places where everybody could get together and rent. And they had these struggles of, this
Yeah.
place isn't, it's too expensive, so we need to go to a different place, or this place, not enough space, all these struggles that you've experienced. And then the church, starts to flourish and be blessed, and the membership grows.
Yeah.
And now you're in a position of influence because you are good friends with the pastor.
Yeah.
You're part of the leadership and all these things. And then you could hold on to that for 15, 20 years. So my question to you is, why do you think that our predecessors who were in that position are still holding on to power? And are you planning to do that? Or how are you going to empower the next generation?
So for us, one of the biggest things was when the church started, there wasn't bureaucracy, like we call it. Most churches, if you want to do something with the youth, then you have to bring it to committee, then they have to, do all of these meetings. At first, Shekinah didn't have that many members to do that anyways,
Yeah.
And there was a time when there weren't any kids, so there was children's ministry at Shekinah.
Yeah.
And now all of it's like it's 1 year. Everybody it was giving birth. You know what I mean?
That's right.
And so now we have over, I'd say over 10, children's
Yeah.
children in the church for children's ministry. So there's Sister Rose, she's the wife of the first elder. She's really good at children's ministry. So she started children's ministry. And then, young adults started coming to the church, and then we decided to start young adult ministry, But really, one of the things that, we all always talk about is, young adult ministry is not my ministry. You know what I mean? This is what
Got
I
it.
do for the church. But one thing what we do mostly at the church, like, all of us at PDF Ministry, we're also part of the media ministry at the church also.
Yeah.
But whenever a new family comes to the church, we talk to them, especially the kids, we get them involved into something, right? They either get involved in community service ministry, young adult ministry, or media ministry, It's your first day at the church. Next Sabbath, you're gonna stand behind the camera and watch us do the live stream for the church, so they can all feel like, when they come here, they belong there. You know what I mean? Because we don't want anybody to come to the church and just, they're there to warm the seats every Saturday. They're not doing it. Because a lot of times, some parents, there was this lady, she came up to us and she said, hey, I want my son to preach. I want my son to preach next Saturday. This is not up to me to put your son up there to preach, But when there's youth Sabbath, then we make sure that, they're part of, the service, or whenever there's choir rehearsal, we let everybody know, hey, there's choir rehearsal. But one of the biggest things we do at Shekinah is we have, we all gather every other Saturday of the month, right? And we do free time night, game nights, and things like that, right? But really, as far as me personally, I don't think I don't look at it as being in a position of power, Yes, we're part of the church leadership, right? As far as, whenever there's board meeting, we sit in board meeting, but we also do elections, right? So whenever there's nomination, if they nominate someone else, then that person will be in charge of, young adult ministry. Because for a couple of years, I was not in charge of, young adult ministry. And then when they had last nomination, then I became, again, part of young adult ministry. So for me personally, I don't think I want to hold on, to power. You know what I mean?
Got it. Yeah.
Because if there's someone else that comes after me that needs, that's qualified to do the work, it's definitely, normal for them. We have to make that transition, you know, because we don't want to repeat what's happening, you know, other
Yeah.
churches. You know,
Yeah.
it's the same person. They no longer are a young adult, yet they're in charge of young adult ministry. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because then there's that disconnect. You know, you can't relate to those young adults. They can't relate to you. They're not going to come to you and trust you with certain things. You know, so why are you even part of young adult ministry? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's something we definitely.
So my question to you then, after
Mhm.
that, hearing all these wonderful things, man, of how, my question is, what do you say to a young adult who's
Mhm.
seeing, you're flourishing, your leadership is growing, the church is growing, all these things. What do you say to that young adult who's having a tough time in a church that has a leader that does like to hold on to power and things like that,
Mhm.
and they don't want to empower the next generation? What advice do you give to that kind of leader?
Um, well, first to the young adult, my advice would be to, still get involved, start something, right? Because one of the biggest issues we have, with young adults sometimes is like they would be afraid to take initiative, right? If I'm not delegated to do something, then I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to sit and wait,
Yeah.
until somebody tells me, hey, go do this, then I go do it, right? Um, One thing that has worked for us at Shekinah is make sure that, most Haitian churches, they have service in French. Young adults don't speak French. you know,
Mm.
most of the adults don't even speak French. So why having service in French? So we have service in Haitian Creole or English. Otherwise you would lose the young adults, right? So the people that are there, the young adults that are there, we make sure that, not only are they part of something in the church, but also if there's something they want to start, they can definitely start. If you're in a church where you feel like your voice is not being heard, you can start a small group with the young adults, do something yourself. And I got that example from a church I used to attend back when we were in college. Pastor Sheila used to be a student pastor at that church, and we used to go there before Shekinah started, called Living Waters Worship Center, Seventh-day Adventist Church. And whenever they have, Kwanzaa, they never do it at the church, you know. So they train young adults and adults alike in their church, and then they have them host the Kwanzaa at their respective homes, right? So they invite
Yeah.
people in their neighborhoods to come to their house and they preach to those people. Because the pastor's idea was that if people can come to your home, people that people that know you, they'll be more comfortable coming to your house versus going to your church. Once they come to
Ah.
your house, you preach to them at your home. Then, in turn,
Yeah.
they'll want to go to your church, right? If they like what they saw at your house.
Yeah.
So, this is the same idea that we wanted to replicate. Bring people to wherever you are, whether it's my house, your place, start something, and then eventually, if your friends like it, then they come with you to church. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
that's one thing we try not, a lot of churches get wrong. And then, I mean, for that leader that wants to hold on to power, a lot of times, what does it get you? That's a question a lot of people have to ask themselves. Yeah, you want to cling on to power, but then again, membership is declining. You have to ask yourself, what do I play a role in the decline in membership in the
Yeah.
church? Right? Why are the young adults leaving the church? A lot of times, um, kids come back. They come back from college. They got dreads and things like that, piercings, and then right at the door, people say, "Oh, listen to me. What happened to you? And things like that." And they feel like now they're being, how do I even say that? They're being attacked and things like that, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, one thing that I'm really adamant about, Shekinah, is that just because you did something doesn't necessarily mean that I need to tolerate what you did, right? If what you did is wrong, I'm gonna call it out, right? I'm gonna point it out. I'm not gonna do it in front of everybody to embarrass you, because once you do that, you lose them forever, right? I'm gonna
That's
pull you
right.
aside. I'm gonna talk to you clearly, tell you, hey, what you're doing is not correct. This is not correct. This is not acceptable. You either fix it, because people are gonna have some things to say about it, right? You make them see where you're coming from. You make them understand why you're telling them what you're telling them, and then it's up to them to either change it or not come back. You can force them,
Yeah.
right? But we always have to make sure that, we're asking ourselves a question. What can we do better? What are we doing wrong in the church? How can we improve what we're doing? Because at the end of the day, you want to start a dictatorship in the church. It's for the own downfall of the church. Eventually all the pews are going to be empty, and you're only going to be preaching to yourself.
Wow.
Yeah.
I totally agree with those statements, and it's something that I think that we need to empower our young adults, man. They're already leaders. They're leaders
Yeah.
at their jobs. They're leaders in their
Exactly.
communities. It's time to empower them, because they're the ones that know how to relate to that teenager right now that you're having a tough time reaching. They're the ones that they can reach that teenager. They can have that honest conversation. I think that's what they sometimes forget. They think that we're going to tolerate things too. It's not we're going to tolerate them. It's we'll know how to talk to them.
Exactly.
Which is we're not going to do it in public. We're not gonna come after their dreads first. We're gonna have conversations with them. We're gonna know the person first. If I am not going to talk to somebody who I just see coming into my church with dreads, and I've never had a conversation with the person before, because the first impressions count. So if I've had 100 conversations with you, and then you come to my church and you change your haircut, then I may have a conversation. And usually what I'll do is I'll say, why did you change your hair? Instead of, Mes amis, I'll say, why? That's the thing, I'll say, why did you change your hair? Because you might get a very profound answer. I mean, you might get somebody who says, you might get I did it to upset my parents. Okay, all right, then now we can talk, right? It'll be like, you don't need to do that. But you might get something like, well, I met someone who has the same kind of hairdo, and they were really wise, and I learned something. And something might blow you away, and it might not be something as simple as, I want to be a vagabond, which it's usually not the case with these kinds of things. So yeah, man, Ted, this is something, man, that we could talk about all day about, man. I mean, the time has flown. But one thing I want to talk to you about before we start heading off is, man, the power of multimedia ministry. I mean, especially because of COVID-19 and having to use Zoom, StreamYard, vMix, good audio and video quality. Talk to that importance, especially to our Haitian churches, man.
One of the biggest things right now is, I remember when I first came to the States, when Facebook came around, the older generation, they used to say, Facebook is of the devil, and never gave you a reason, but that was it. Facebook's a bad job, Christians, you're not supposed to be on Facebook and things like that. And then I remember when GV and NG, they came out with the Sabbath School app, you could do the lesson right on your phone. And our church, people downloaded the app, and there were some members that were not okay with it, because they said, you bring technology into the church and things like that. So when we started expanding the ministry, bringing cameras into the church, doing all of this live streaming of our services, some people were not okay with it, because they felt like it took away from the solemnity of the service. And for me personally, it's like there's a lot of people that can't physically come to the church, right? We can bring our service to them. This is our way of ministering, right? Because at the end of the day, as a Seventh-day Adventist, our job is to make sure that the gospel is preached and everybody hears it, right? So when the pandemic hit, well, even before that, I remember in a church board meeting, we talked about removing certain aspects of our service, because to us they were unnecessary. When you have call to worship, because why are you calling everybody to worship when everybody is already there, ready to worship, right? There's no need for a call to worship. That's some of the things that we brought up in board meeting, and people were not okay with that. They like the structure of the service. It has to be this way. And then Corona came, and none of these things mattered anymore. So now it's a matter of, you have all of these members that can't come to the same location, how do you reach them, right? A lot of people suggested, phone call and things like that, right? Just having church over the phone. But it's when, like I told you earlier, when we started doing the live streaming, now, this service, it doesn't only reach Shekinah members, right? It's a global thing. We have people in the Caribbean, and we have people in Haiti, we have people in France, we have people in Africa that watch the service. And, it shows you the importance, because at the end of the day, we're not doing this for, this is the best live. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Our goal is to make sure that this service reaches as many people as it can, because at the end of the day, if we stay at Shekinah and we preach with no live, and it's only the members that hear the message, we're just, it's how they say, you mopping the sea.
Mopping the sea.
Yeah,
Wow.
because at the end of the day, you can't just preach for the members of your church. Yes, the congregation, they need to hear the word, but at the end of the day, if your congregation hears the word and the neighborhood doesn't even know there's a church here, the Seventh-day Adventist church in this building, you're not doing any work.
Boom. Wow. The community needs to know there's a church.
There you
That's
go.
the whole purpose of the gospel, man.
Yeah.
Man, Ted, tell us where we can find, you, PDF Ministries. We want to hook into when Drop the Mic Season 2 comes on, École du Sabbat. We want to listen to all this great content. Where do we find it?
Well, Drop Mic is hosted on PDF Ministries social media page. So you can find Drop Mic on Instagram at the Drop Mic Show. You can find PDF Ministry on Facebook and on YouTube. You just go PDF Ministry. That's on Facebook and YouTube. École du Sabbat is a Sabbath School lesson review that has its own YouTube page. It's École du Sabbat, and also on Facebook as well, École du Sabbat. And me personally, I'm on Facebook, Ted Registre, on Instagram at Ted. So definitely, guys, check us out, support our ministries.
Wow. Man, this is some good stuff. So guys, check out their ministry, support them, hit their like buttons, subscribe, so you can always be knowing what PDF Ministries is doing. So Once again, you have been listening to For the Z. This has been on 93.7 FM SCA1 Radio Sentinel. And you can find me on Instagram at youth_mentor101. Check out my podcast, check out my content. So we can learn to bridge the gaps between generations in our churches, in our communities, in our homes, man. Bridging the gaps from generation A to Z. This is For the Z. And we will see you next time, next Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Same place, same station, same time. So we can continue to grow together by listening to one another. So thank you guys for listening. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Pop out with some lessons for a lifetime. We finna sit down and talk about the times. Keeping it 100 for the one time. For our generation, talking all the time. For the sea, yeah, yeah. For the sea, for the sea, yeah, yeah. For the sea, yeah, yeah. For the sea, pop out with the Z.